difficult to understand it. Thanks, Silvia. Thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. I have to thank Silvia. I cannot thank you enough for the opportunity to share with you some of our thoughts on landscape, and I keep repeating this as a mantra. It's wonderful for us to have the time, to give us the time to think about why we are working in landscape architecture and why we are working it the way we do it. Is it okay with the sound? And I know that this is a very difficult exercise, being so far away and all, but please, I'm trying to do it in a different language other than your native one. So please bear with me and don't hesitate in stopping if you have any question. I would love for this to become a conversation rather than just me showing slides. I thought that for today's conversation, it would be kind of nice to begin talking about this guy, Nicolas Moreno. This is a Mexican painter from the last century who dedicated most of his work in the sketching and drawing landscape all over the country. In doing so, some of the most important intellectuals from Mexico talked about his work and reflected on Mexican landscape. That's some of the most some of the things I love about his work. He put landscape into the radar. Carlos Pellicer, an important writer from last century as well, would say from his work that you would get exhausted only by looking at the landscape, of walking through the landscape by means of the pictures. And I would say that the reason why you would get tired of only looking at the pictures is because of the amount of information is better. There is not only the beautiful images, but the actual investigation or research he did on the landscape and the kind of landscapes he chose. They are very particular. The drama, for instance, in this case, of a forest that went through a fire and it's been born again. And that's why we have these very robust trunks, and then the branches beautifully drawn. This kind of drama is the type of landscapes he would choose, not the more conventional ones or more commonly beautiful, but the more dramatic ones, I would say. It's always these trees that has to do a lot with the conditions and I mean the topographic or the floods. In this case, for instance, the absence of trees is due to the proximity to volcanoes, so that we have over there a thick layer of volcanic material, almost no soil. So we have a very particular landscape, and he would work a lot on that kind of condition that surround us. Probably 1/3 of our country has that kind of landscape. I would say that probably he is one of the responsibles for making this kind of aesthetics that Mariana Jampolsky, the Mexican photographer, even though she was born in Chicago, her family is from Germany and Russia, she would do her complete work in Mexico, and she would die in Mexico as well. And she would travel the country taking pictures of this drama, of the way landscape, I mean plants and people make their way in our landscape. Juan Rulfo is another one. Juan Rulfo, probably you are familiar with his literary work. Both of his books are practically drawing landscapes through words. I believe his work as a photographer, is a little bit less known. Nevertheless, is, in my opinion, as beautiful, as powerful as his books. And once again, he used to draw our attention in the drama of the landscape as being one with the people and the context and all the processes that take place in landscape, being landscape not only the container, but rather the result of all the processes that takes place on a place. Sorry. Jose Maria Velasco is another example, even though he's much older than the ones I have already shown to you. Jose Maria Velasco would depict the landscape in a way, in my opinion, that would emphasizes the processes, in this case, agriculture as an economical process, the way people found their way in this place. On the back, you would see the volcanoes, the most important ones that we have near Mexico City, Popo and Ista. Do you see my cursor, by the way?
Yes, yes.
Great. So for the ones that do not know much about our city, Mexico City. Mexico City is in a kind of a valley. It's rather a basin that used to be flooded during the rainy season, but otherwise it's a very flat surface with water that has to do with salty water that comes from the hills, dragging all the minerals. But some other parts of our lakes are fresh water from underground. So in this case, he would depict the driest season, not the most blossoming or beautiful one, showing the way we have to deal with landscape in order to have economical progress, and the way we shape landscape by means of our economical processes. So we believe that landscape is not a matter of the way you want to make it more beautiful, but the way you want to understand it as a process and how you are part of this process. Maybe one of the most easy ways to understand that landscape is a process has to do with another Mexican painter from the last century, Guillermo Murillo, aka Dr. Atl, would spend his life drawing volcanoes. And once again, the drama of landscape being built in time. I find his work amazing. He would always emphasize that landscape has to do with time and has to do with processes. And when drawing it, you would understand, or would try to understand and to speak the language of the landscape. Natural processes. Casimiro Castro would put the emphasis in social processes. This is a view from Mexico in the area where we have the lakes with fresh water. This is Ahuejote here, one of our most common trees in this area that looks a lot like Populus nigra, but it's another kind of tree. In fact, this is a salix. And he would go, this Casimiro Castro would depict always the landscape along with the way people would wear at that time. I mean, he would try to show that landscape also has to do with social processes and people, and the way people act and the way people wear dresses. Sorry, fashion has to do also with the landscape. All in all, I think that that our reflection would have to do that sometimes landscape is the responsibility of the way people moves around the landscape. On the left, we have Brasilia, and that would be probably the extreme example of people making landscape out of nothing, and that landscape is nothing but the result of the people's activity on the site, on the surface, or in the territory. And on the right, we have Tepoztlan. This is a small village in Mexico, south of Mexico, some 100 kilometers south. And that you would probably have on your mind better examples of how the city has become part of the territory as a result of the site. When I was thinking about that, that comes to my mind two books that has a lot to do with that. Massimo Cacciari's, probably you are so much more familiar than me with this book, and the way he would explain that how sometimes landscape is it's the result of people's activity, and sometimes the landscape itself is responsible for the way people interacts with the landscape. And in the other hand, we have Del Paraíso al Jardín Latino, this book that tried to explain the way landscape made its way through times and why we have landscape the way we have it right now. So all in all, the history of man is the history of landscape. You can tell the way people has related to the context by means of the way we build it. This is an image of Mexico City, in an area that landscape was not so powerful, or was not as powerful the context as the activities itself. So we had just a dump here. It was full of garbage, all this area, and the government decided to build a business district here. So that maybe at the beginning we will find this kind of relationship, sidewalks that no one would walk. It is completely hostile to the people walking around. But in the other hand, in the same place, you would have this kind of contrast. And I would say that this is landscaping on the making, and the activities are so much more important than the place itself. In the other hand, you will have villages like Quetzalan, Puebla, which is all about the site. This is a rainy place. It's 360 days a year of raining, so that architecture and people and the stone are are talking about our landscape. Obviously, this is not exclusive for Mexico. All over the world, we have the proofs of the architecture trying to understand their context, and it's a matter of life or death. This impluvium in Casamance in Senegal, that's the only way, or the most important way, to build a house so that you can collect rainwater, or the way in India deals with the rainy season, with the monsoon. Studio Mumbai's Copper House make a beautiful statement out of it. So I would say that this is the way we understand landscape being foremost time, and time drawing us, time shaping the way we live. This is an image we would watch at school at Barcelona. This is the most simple way to depict time in architecture. And another picture that would explain how we made landscape, yet landscape makes us, so that it's a virtuous circle or a detrimental one. It's actually on us, whether this drawing hands by Maurice Escher is something that we can understand of landscape. It's we work on landscape as landscape works on us. So landscape being a result of agriculture or social or economical processes, landscape being an important part of our spiritual life, or being part of our joy of life, or simply as a scientific approach trying to understand and assume humans as part of nature. I think landscape becomes a very complex aspect of the human activity. As such, I think it's super important to not to understand landscape as just trying to make it as beautiful as possible, but rather to trying to make it as an element to make yourself part of the community you are living in. This is so I will show you some of our work related to the first part of this conversation. On the outside of Mexico City, on the hills, we have a pine forest. This is pine and oaks forest mainly. These woods would disappear basically for agricultural activities. So these agaves would be part of the agriculture, as well as for animals to grass in this area. Agaves are very fortunate plants, not only because of their beauty and the drama of them. These are drawings by Ricardo Martinez, another wonderful painter from Mexico. But these plants also allows for the soil to be retained and the nutrients and all the minerals, so that erosion is prevented. As you can see, these agaves are aligned, so that following the contour lines, so that erosion is prevented. So this kind of agricultural activity, even though they removed the forest, it's very sensitive to the ecology of the site. And this is the way you would see a natural area of the same forest, where we have pines and we have growing trees in the underneath the so-called sotobosque, or understory. Once the construction began, even though architecture was super smooth and they tried to be sensitive to the site, once construction began, they practically removed the organic layer surrounding the construction, and it was super sad to see how this beautiful landscape was removed. And our work was to bring landscape back again. So when dealing with the soil, we decided to work with two basic conditions. One is the tecorral, which is dry stone walls, and the dry river. Tecorral is a very common practice in Mexico, and by the pictures I imagine in Italy, lots of places that works the same. Mediterranean is packed of examples like this, and we all know the beauty of this system, where we have no cement between the stones. It's a great space for the plants and for insects and living beings to dwell. So this becomes a city for diversity, for biodiversity. So what we decided is to start working in platforms by building these stones element, these stone walls that would help us fighting back erosion on the first years, so that in the first years we have the tools in order to prevent soil from running down the site. Agaves would be brought back. This would help us a lot in order to fix soil and minerals in the soil. And we would plant also a small vegetation in the gaps of the stones, because in this area you would retain lots of humidity. And on the other hand, when stopping all the water, we would send it to this dry river, this kind of open air drainage, rather than just putting pipes and sending back to the municipality drainage or sewage system. We would try to retain water, to slow down the water, and make sure that we keep as much water as possible, so that we can water our new vegetation. So all that you would see here are plants trying to restore the forest that once was there. This is the river a year from now. 3 years from now, we do have the forest back. Also, pavers would be part of this idea of trying to not to have an impervious surface. Trying to gain water, to retain water, is also a matter of platforms, not to have concrete slabs. And this is the way the site looks now. After all, the client's idea to have a home here is not to have an urban kind of landscape, but rather be back in the forest. So that was our aim. In another kind of context, within the city, we have this garden, this small garden for a house, where they have a concrete slab. Crazy enough, the neighbor was a beautiful piece of forest, so that the house, while this is part of the house being during construction. So what we were asked for is to bring back a garden to live in. The idea was to blur the limits between the indoor and the outdoor condition, so that people can actually live in the garden, not only to see it from within and make it a ornamental phenomenon, but rather being part of the house. So that when you are in the public or common area, you would go out and spend the afternoon outdoors and have your breakfast, or go to do your homework outdoors. That's something also, it's a responsibility for landscape in places like Mexico, where our weather conditions are wonderful. We never have extreme conditions, extreme hot or extreme cold weathers. So it is like a hope for me to make garden part of the house and the house part of the garden, so that we blur we can blur the limits. This kind of opportunities became so much more important the last year, because, as you all know, people would be aware of how important a garden is during this stay-at-home phase we all had to endure during last year. So people would be sensitive about the importance of be related or relate with nature. Where we used to have a concrete slab, we make sure by means of porous elements for people to be in the landscape, to be among the nature and to be part of the nature. In order to do so, we believe that the plants need to be or need to have all the conditions they need in order to be whatever they want to be. That is to say, we are not interested in guiding the plants in making whatever we want, but rather we see ourselves as agents that promote the conditions for plants to be whatever they want, so that in the end it looks as natural as possible, and that it was not made by man. We don't want the gardener to become the most important element of the landscape, but the plants themselves. These are some other examples of these outdoor living areas we've worked on. Both of these are on rooftops, so they are so much more built or part of architecture than the latter. For obvious reasons, in this case, we needed to work on top of concrete slabs. Sometimes we had no opportunity to have soil layer so that we can make it as natural as possible. In that line, I believe this is a good example of how we see the problem of people dealing with the outdoor area. This is Children's Museum, and as crazy as it sounds, most of the outdoor areas of this cultural facility was completely built. There was no piece of landscape whatsoever. And once you find it, it was super unfortunate. These elements that guide you to not to get into the landscape, but they work rather as a fence. Trees being manipulated not to become what they want to be, and this playground being ridiculously hostile. Even though we do have great weather, children cannot stand maybe 10 minutes on still playground facilities at good 25 degrees. It was crazy. It was super sad. So when we were asked to work in this place, we would think in the way Richard Foreman would say, that in ecology, this kind of relationship between two kind of habitats it's not as fruitful as the one on the right, where you have these limits blurred, and you have so much stronger relationship, so strong that you would find not only two conditions, but a third one, the in-between condition, or the ecotone, which is also a very important concept for our work. So the idea was to turn this place this playground as an opportunity for kids to get closer to nature, to make sure that we deliver the message that we are not in charge of nature, but rather we are nature ourselves, and that by doing so, we are blurring the limits of being inside a cultural facility and outside a cultural facility, but rather the whole premises are part of this idea of learning and playing at the same time. So we would work with topography and with these landscape conditions, such as being at ground level or being at the bottom of a creek or on top of a lake. All these elements are part of Mexico City's landscape, so that we would try to reproduce indoors these landscapes, but we wanted to make sure that we are not reproducing an image, but rather a process. This is the plan of the proposal. The proposal was to, first of all, gather water on top of the site, and then as soon as the water fills up, the water tanks fills up, this would be there would be this kind of river, which is a natural drainage in case of floods, and then you would get rid of it. In the upper parts where we have lots of sun, we would have succulents and whatnot. And as soon as we go down, we have this kind of creek condition where we would have the forest area. This would help us because all this woodland or this forest will help us buffering from the rest of the city, which is not so fortunate on the far right. We would have a very crowded street. So here you can see on the left the water container, and on the right the dry river. This is being built, where the first thing we would have to do is to get rid of all the concrete and all these built elements in order to have this water container. Building by means, once again, of the dry walls, this topography, creating this artificial topography. This is the river. The river, of course, would not have a concrete layer or linings. This is for water to be moved slowly, but water needs to go underneath the soil, so that all the plants that we have around this river are watered naturally by means of this river. So stone becomes necessary in order to prevent from erosion, and in the other hand, this would help for the plants to remain in that place. And this is the water element once was finished. This is the creek area, and all the dry wall becomes part of our landscape. As I told you before, most of our landscape has to deal with this lava stone layer we have, and all the plants learning to live in the gaps of these stones that the stones provide. We did this with an architecture thing with a couple of young architects, Jorge Ambrosi and Gabriele Chegaray, and they would come up with this great idea of having this kind of bridge to walk through the canopies of the trees. So hopefully, in the future, we can also have air plants, and we can allow the children to take a closer look to the branches and to the leaves, and make sure that they understand that leaves underneath the canopy are not the same leaves as the ones they have on top of the tree, even though it's the same tree. At the same where we would want for the kids to have the opportunity to have a much funner way to approach to the learning nature. Sorry. This is another project we are about to finish. This is a huge house that was that used to be part of that used to be owned by an important politician in Mexico. Once again, a very unfortunate garden where you can see all these plants being controlled to the extreme. We found this to be a very old-fashioned way to see the relationship with nature, and it doesn't come as a surprise at some point to have this kind of gardens. Sad enough, we still see lots of these throughout the city. This is the site is super big, and the idea for this new owner is to have 5 houses that will be built in time. So they would have first one house, and then we would have to have a space for building the other houses in time. That's why we have a big space of lawn. And the idea was for us to try to build the surroundings for these houses. So the farther you get, the more natural it is. And as you approach the house, landscape becomes a little bit more of an architectural approach. An important thing is that watering lawn or lawn maintenance becomes an issue because the amount of water required is ridiculous. Sometimes it's embarrassing. So by having these 2,000 square meters of lawns, we have to make sure that all this water is sent to a place where we can use it. So once again, the dry river is used as a boundary far to the west, north being to the left. So at the end of this lawn, we have a very gentle slope all the way down to the boundary, where we collect all the water. This is the dry river. On the left, we would have the lawn, and then we would collect all the water here. All these trees were brought, and the idea is all this nature is being watered by the lawn, by all the water that is not used by the lawn. So once again, it would try to become as natural as possible, a natural element. Some trees, unfortunately, have plagues and have to be removed when they were previously treated and were brought back to the site in order to become organic matter in time. Once again, the stones being used as part of the landscape and hopefully they will become landscape themselves. Promoting spaces or places for people to find them as a surprise. We had the opportunity to work with Rick Joy, and he would call them Easter eggs. These elements that you find as a surprise, even though you are the owner and you know they are there. It's crazy how important it is for us to keep reminding the idea of spending time outdoors. So we always try to add a corner, piece of stone or a wood as a bench, as a reminder for people to spend some time there. So passages, steps, and all the elements we tried to insert in landscape are hopefully, fingers crossed, will disappear in time if they are not used. If they are used, they will reach their right proportions. But But our wish, all in all, is for landscape to disappear, for our landscape, for our hand to disappear. In other words, we want our work to be swallowed by time, to be swallowed by landscape. I think that the stones do a wonderful work in that way. Here we would, I think that stones are the ones that will remain in time, where the plants will die and grow back again, so that we have two times shown with these natural elements. The linear time represented in the stones that will not change in time apparently, and the plants that will keep coming back as in the as the seasons go back and forth, they will renew themselves. The stone will remain there, but the stone will also be available to, we'll be able to represent the time. That has to do maybe something that Nietzsche said about the plastic power or the plasticity of the elements, that being the capacity for an organism to accept time within and grow because of the time. And that's why we keep using these natural materials as opposed to concrete or artificial materials. We try to move apart from woods being waterproof. We believe is so much more beautiful for the materials to show the time they've been there. And that's why we want to always blur the limits of these elements, trying to make sure that the architecture is swallowed and become landscape. Recently, we've been asked to work in landscape in a very different way. We've been lucky enough to work in landscapes that are just wonderful. That it seems that there's nothing for us to do but to homage this place, to prepare the place for people to enjoy the landscape. And in this case, this is the case of trying to build a canopy for people to be in on top of a hill. And the idea was to work with as natural as possible with local elements. All these elements are part of the construction leftovers. And the idea is, once again, for the architecture to slowly disappear, to be swallowed by time. Even this concrete water container was built with wood of the construction. And this is another case where where the owner have this beautiful small river. And the idea was only, this is about 30 houses that are gathered around this river. And the landscape intervention is only to provide these bridges or crossings or these otherwise architecture elements for people to be oriented in the landscape. So once again, landscape wants to work in a very subtle, delicate manner. In this case, what we were aiming at is to, as I was saying, work into ways or reflecting on the two ways matter adapts to time. On the one hand, having stone being swallowed by time, and wood elements or wood structures that could be easily replaced or taken away without being a dramatic wounds inflicted in landscape. In this case, the most important feature is the stone. Once again, in this place near a volcanic area, the stone is the element, the most useful element. In order to build, you have to dig for foundations, and when doing so, you have all these stones at hand to work with. So once we were invited to work here, we could use all this stone and the remains of these pavers that was used in a porous way. These are also remains that were cut and flipped in order to have this kind of pavers. Once again, the corral. And in this case, maybe the important thing to talk about from my perspective is how fortunate we are of being able to use the local plants. If this would grow like this in less than a year, it was only a rainy season from the left to the right, and it's crazy how these plants can adapt and grow like crazy. On the back, we see these hills, the Postlan, and by means of using the same stone, we're practically working with the same temperature of colors. There would be also the opportunity for adding or bringing new plants, but that would be done very carefully, choosing places where we would insert new elements of landscape. This is a hill in the Pacific coast. Its landscape is beautiful. This was also a volcano. Actually, this is half of the volcano. The other half disappeared inside the sea, inside the ocean. So we have kind of an agora here, and beautiful, crazy large trees. So the idea here, we also have archaeological elements here. And this is a cross-section of the scale of the trees. There's a dot here, and the size of the trees that would reach as much as 20 to 40 meters even. So the idea here was to work on in the understory, by keeping all the trees and knowing beforehand that once people start working here, the understory would be damaged and we would work there. These are some images that reflects the importance of the section and how architecture, quote unquote, is being built by nature. That means that topography and trees are the elements for us to build architecture as well. So when studying the conditions, we also worked in the canopies and the shade that was projected by all these trees throughout the year. So there are some palm trees that would cast a very thick shade, and some other trees, supposed like parota trees, for instance, that has a very nice subtle shade that allows for plants to grow underneath, whereas in some other cases that is not possible. So the idea was to start working with by imagining that we would keep the understory and we would insert landscape underneath these beautiful canopies, gaining back the importance of the runoffs in the area, and also making them an important feature of the landscape, so that you would spend time in the landscape even though it's raining, because it's a very drastic change between the raining season and the drought season. Also, an important part of the landscape was to promote privacy indoors from the from roads and pathways, so that vegetation would become a natural boundary or buffering. And this is an image of the villages. This architecture was made originally by Rick Joy and finished by Caban Architecture, which is a beautiful. It was they were very delicate, and they did a wonderful job trying to profit as much as possible on the nature. And our job was only to bring back nature once again. So that pathways and the means of egress of these, the means of access and egress of these places would become part of the nature experience. This is something that was fundamental part of the experience in the project phase. And as I said, the most important part for us was, once infrastructure finished their job, we would have to bring back landscape so that you are surrounded, you are inside the jungle. This is some of the most unfortunate moments during the construction process. And once finished, we would be lucky enough to work on a site where landscape is super dynamic. I mean, plants during the raining season can adapt and grow extremely fast, so that we can practically bring back landscape on a 1 year season, taking into account that we have to protect the large trees. This is another exercise we had in the opportunity to work in Fiji. And I think that the most important aspect of this project that I like to show is that the beauty of a context that you have the opportunity to work with is also a responsibility. You have to try to understand that in the record time what the process or what the most important aspects of this landscape is. Here's the line where you land, and you have to drive probably for 20 to half an hour on a car to the hotel itself. And when doing so, you would cross the most beautiful landscape, crazy airplanes, lianas, beautiful trees and plants. And once you get to the resort, you find this. You find lawn and coconut trees. It couldn't be more impersonal, it couldn't be sadder the way landscape was. It was super impersonal. It was something that you would find probably wherever you have this kind of weather. These stones placed like in a very pointless manner, and just having plants brought from inland, which is super expensive as well. So what the client was asking for is to have a new perspective on landscape. When being there, when visiting the site, we found these beautiful depictions of how would people reflect on landscape, how the people would live their landscape, and I think that's the most simple way to try to bring back the soul of the landscape in this area. So the idea was, once again, to try to work with the local elements such as stones and the plants that already have there, and how simple it is to move pieces around and plants because of the context, how of the beauty and kindness of the weather there. We have excellent soil. This is a volcanic island. We have great rainy seasons, and we have powerful plants that will adapt very easily. So we could move plants like this and plant them back again with no problem whatsoever. So we would have to take all the people that was working in landscape back to the hills and ask them to see this place and bring back the idea, so that we could reconfigure all the plants so that they look natural, rather than to make an effort of making look as a garden. These guys would not work with plants, but rather we would have to try to work hand in hand by putting the plants and trying to convey the idea of making a garden by not making it quote unquote, but rather trying to imitate the local natural conditions of the site. Once again, nature was kind enough to do the rest of the job. Plants would grow easily and in no time. We would use also the rocks of the site and the gravel of the site. As I told you, this is a volcanic island, and there was tons of this gravel that we could use in order to reproduce these grava fields. So the access would have, oh, sorry, let me see if I can move this. So in the access, instead of having these kind of planters, we would use the power of the local stones and try to reproduce the local conditions. And I think that's it, Silvia. I'm not sure if it took too long.
Hugo.
Thanks, guys.
Absolutely not. Thank you very much. I think it was very inspiring, very interesting also for our students, because well, it's a completely different landscape than what we have here. And you mentioned Mediterranean at a certain moment. It's not always so easy to move plants from here to there without difficulties. And you know about this, I guess. Right? So thank you very much. I would ask the students to if they have questions, they can ask by themselves or write it in the chat. And I see in the meantime that Felix Madrazo is connected, is with us. So he follow your lecture as well from Rotterdam.
Hey, Felix.
Saludos.
Are you there?
Hello.
Great to hear from you. Thanks for being here.
So, guys, some questions?
Yes, I have questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, before in a slide, you said el paisaje hacia la gente hacia el paisaje. So we can define that the people, but also every line begin is an animated layer in continuous updating that as a time and with the time converts the weather into a landscape.
Oh, sorry, I missed the question. I'm sorry.
We can find that the action the man consumes and shapes modify just when walking or placing your hand at the natural elements. So we can define that the people is converting the weather into a landscape.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I'm positive about that. I think that the most important thing for us is to try to understand landscape before working on landscape. And in doing so, we think that the processes are key for us to understand whatever is going on. So whatever process are taking place, you have to insert yourself into that process before making sure. You have to make sure you understand that process before inserting yourself in. That was a beautiful finger rule from Ramon Folk from Barcelona. He would say that you have to take a good look of the site and define three kind of processes: the processes that are worth to keep, the processes that are detrimental for the site, and the processes that could be a good opportunity to bring into the site to add. And with these three simple ways to see the processes, you could make your mind on the site and start trying to figure out what's the best way to work on the site.
And I would like to say two things. The first one is that I really appreciate the way you use the natural materials, and like for the stone or the wood, and for making the natural seating an example. And I've never been in Mexico, but is the idea I have of your country about the landscape. And this is so interesting. And the second thing is a question. You told us that it's really important in a project to keep the contact between the project inside one area and the external part of the area. When is present a surrounding landscape, an existing bed. And in your project, are you used to bring the external plants inside, or you choose a new material, a new...
Thank you. I'm not sure if I understood, though. I'm not. I will try to understand, and please let me know if I didn't understand or I'm not being precise. In trying to blur the limits between indoors and outdoors, it is so much more simple for us to try to bring indoor activities outdoor, such as spending your time outside. It's either a hammock or as simple as a stone for people to spend 15 minutes reading your book outside, or just taking a phone call outside. And when doing the opposite, trying to bring outdoors inside, it's also a question of how involved we are with architects, and that's probably two levels of an answer. First of all, I would have to say that we are super fortunate of working with architects in this generation that are really concerned in making architecture as part of the context, or part of the context. I think that we are not that young anymore. Felix would also say so. And we remember that when we were in the school, landscape was nowhere as part of our studies. And now it is becoming so much more important each time. And architects, these young new architects, are taking landscape seriously, so that they invite us to make sure that landscape is part of architecture outside so much as inside, so that the relationship indoor outdoors also comes from the architect. And that's beautiful, that's wonderful. We couldn't find a much nicer way to work with than with architects that really authentically in landscape. And the second part of the answer would probably be once the architecture is done, and that's where Carla, my wife, is working with, is trying to make landscape as part of the everyday life indoors, as trying to bring indoor plants and trying to make sure that we have the right lighting and the right amount of fresh air for people to spend their lives inside their house in a healthy way. That comes hand in hand. And I think that's the easiest way for us to work with. In bringing indoor outdoors, we also try to deal with the materiality. Sometimes with the materials they are working with such as pavers, stones, or wood, we try to use that same material but in a different way. That being with porous permeable pavers, or with a better texture so that it's not slippery when wet, or stuff like that. Is that an answer? Maybe.
Yes, was this the answer? And because I was asking this just about the relationship between inside the project and the external part. So thank you so much.
While we wait for other questions, I have one for you, because you never really, in all your lecture, you never mentioned the word sustainable or sustainability, but what you show is actually the answer itself, because you try to use local plants to respect their conditions and their way of growing and their context. You combine this with local materials, so trying to use really stones from the place and not even working too much on them, and then you get you get back nature. You get really fast growing landscape. And then my question would be, what's your point of view about, for instance, what we have now, like at the top of our everyday, let's say, political talking, that is the Bosco Verticale in Milan, which is mentioned everywhere as the sustainable way of building architecture. C'è qualcuno sa? Ah, forse qui. Do you understand?
I think that I couldn't think of an easy answer for that. That's maybe the most complex question for such a short time we have. But I would go for two kind of answers. The first one would have to be that for me, being an architect and only having a master's degree in landscape, I have no biologic formation or background or natural science. The tools we have is try to understand nature by observing, by trying to learn, watching, and trying to do a small baby steps research and experiments. And I think that in order to do so, when working on a site, you have to pay very close attention to what the kind of landscape we have where we are going to work. And that is to say, we have to look at the plants that are adapting on the site, so that you work with the same kind of plants, and you have to make sure that whatever plants you work with, you have a previous experience on those plants being there, so that maybe you have a small room for experimentation and adding maybe 1 out of 100 plants to see what happens with that plant. So by saying so, I think that the most sustainable way to work is to try to do things slowly, not to do crazy changes or to do very large investments, so to speak, but rather to go slowly, to go step by step. And in the second answer would have to be that I don't believe that in this kind of political statements to be the most valuable tool in order to save us, but rather being an individual kind of responsibility, and that has to do with us doing that instead of relying on political reasons or laws. I think that it's individual responsibility. Yes, I think so.
Yeah, thank you. It's also very nice, the title. No, we discussed a little bit about the title of your lecture today, Dibujar el Tiempo. I think, yeah, because actually I'm going to explain them. Hugo was asking me, how do we translate dibujar in Italian? And disegnare doesn't have I understood doesn't have the same meaning, because disegnare is the action of drawing, while dibujar, I guess, is to design. So the action of projecting, we say it progettare. So el tiempo, because actually we saw it along your lecture, how the time has really a key role in this. So, and now you are still saying that we must do things slowly, slower, and let time work also, because work with plants, so with the live material, then we need time to let them grow. Another consideration, I think it's very interesting when you talk about beauty, because you said, well, I don't remember exactly what you said, but I guess beauty is not only an aesthetical issue when we build a landscape design, but it's more beauty. It's related to the space we produce and the relation it has with the people that live there, people and animal and nature itself. So beauty is related with the comfort we can generate and the condition of nature. When nature is healthy, then we can live the place in a healthy way. I found this very, very interesting. And
yeah, great, thanks.
We can see it from your work.
We're still trying.
So Anna, do you have questions? I see you came online.
I can try to ask a question, se posso.
Certo, vai.
Okay. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. It was really nice, especially all the art at the beginning. And I wanted to sort of add on to what the professor was asking about the Boeri building and how, and this could be arguable, but maybe that landscape design is seen as a decoration instead of, and what I like what you're saying is that it's how we want to understand the world. It's not just about the beauty. It's designing in order to help people, to sort of hold their hand and help them design or help them understand that the environment they're living in. And so what I want to ask with that is, as architects, because this is probably our first time doing a lot of this landscape stuff, how would you encourage us to start using landscape design as an everyday thing? With your projects, you were definitely showing it how it does the threshold between the interior and outside. But what are the other main directions we can take in order to integrate landscape design into architecture?
Wow. I'm not sure. Maybe that's the question right there. When you were saying that we're trying to make people understand their place in nature, I would go for actually saying that we are not trying to make people understand what their place in nature is, but make it reflected, make it a question of my own. I mean, we as a landscape architect, we are trying, and my guess is that it's going to take a long time to understand what the hell we are doing and why we are doing it, and why we are doing it the way we are doing it. The most important part, Mexican architect Humberto Ricalde would say, is that you make sure that you are building yourself as at the same time you are building the construction. I mean, it's something that you would have to question yourself, and in trying to answer that, you are moving forward, and not the other way around. That is to say, you make sure that when you are copy pasting architecture, you are doing it in a very sensitive manner and trying to understand why you are copying. I'm not saying that you don't have to copy that. That's the most natural way in doing things, but you have to make sure you are trying to understand, not understanding, but trying to understand that. So I guess that I would not try to escape from your question, but I think that is actually the question. How am I going to make sure that architecture is related with the context? That is the question itself. The most beautiful and simplest way I find in the colonial architecture in Mexico is the portico, is this in-between space that you have underneath a canopy. You are not inside, but you are not outside. And it's so simple that it's unbelievable that it's a very simple tool of making indoor-outdoor architecture. And I think that you cannot invent that. You can only reflect on that, on the width of the wall, so that windows are not only a frame for the outdoor, but it's rather a place where you can sit and read a book and profit on the way light comes in, whether it's south or west or whatever. And all those tiny elements that make you appreciate landscape from within are the ones that will make an answer of your own and make you an architect that is sensitive context-wise. I appreciate a lot your question, because that after all is the very question one.
Yeah, thank you. The answer was much better than the question. I didn't expect it. Thank you.
I don't know if I understand very well, but I understand that the way you put architectural elements into landscape allow these elements, if they are not used, to be to return into nature, like steps we saw on an image that were eaten by grass. I don't know if I understand this very well. If this is correct, my question is, this doesn't mean that the garden need lots of cares in order not to be so wild.
I would take that question into another direction. Hope you don't mind. And I think that maintenance for us is a fundamental issue. Maybe 10 years ago, maintenance zero was an issue. It was an everyday request from clients, and they would say, I want a zero maintenance garden, and I want a zero maintenance house. And that's the way they would say, I'm being super ecological, but also I am being smart, because I won't spend a lot in gardeners. And my suspicion, and I suspect that it was much more of an economical concern rather than ecological one. And we would try to answer by saying that it's not a matter of maintenance zero, but doing the right maintenance. I'm super sad when we go to a garden that it's being over-maintained, that they have misdirected maintenance. And when they do cubes out of trees, and they do baskets out of trees. That's super sad. Or when they paint the stones in white and they they remove the stones and they write their names with the stones and doing crazy things like that. And I think that the most important part in the maintenance is to make sure that the maintenance is directed for the garden to have the same spirit it was created with, so that when you work in the garden, you are probably just removing the dead leaves, or if you detect a plague there, you will work in that, or you will make sure that the amount of light requested is being provided by being a very delicate and well-directed prune. All these kinds of things are, in my opinion, well-directed maintenance. So I don't think that maintenance, in the case that you're talking about, is the most important part. What we are talking about mainly is that whatever we do with architecture has to be retroactive in the way of we are not affecting architecture or damaging architecture. We are maybe contributing to it. So that's why we are so interested in not using cement or using elements that will remain there permanently, but rather will disappear in time. That's something that we not always achieve, but it's our goal to make sure that architecture or whatever we do will be swallowed in time, and by doing so, time will turn our activity into landscape.
Okay, nice. I don't want to steal much of your time, Hugo. So you let me know when you're done. We are actually, the guys are working on under the guide of this writer, Italian writer, who is Pia Pera. But she's really passionate. She died a few years ago. She was really passionate of gardens. So she was taking care of her own gardens, and she wrote a lot about gardens. And then suddenly she writes about this will of her to have a vegetable garden of this kind, that you never have to introduce your hand on it, like not maintenance at all. But finally, she was there every day, and she was overwhelmed by the things she needed to do, and by vegetables and fruits that she had so much. So she couldn't say what to do anymore. So that's nice, actually, your answer about this. I would like to ask you one last question, maybe, if there are not others. See, okay, we have another one, maybe, and then I will ask you another one.
When you talk about planning landscape, one of the most important elements it is time. And like space, times have a different scale, like day, season, or year. What's when you are planning, what's come si dice, qual è il suo approccio, diciamo? What's your approach to this different scale of time? I don't know if.
Okay, that's a super complex question as well. I will try to not to become so peripherous about it. But it's the, as I keep stressing the importance of time. It's it has to do pretty much with everything on a daily basis, as you said, seasonal, and through time. I think that the most that one of the most recent and evident examples of this is Piet Udolf's work that has to do with year through lifetime of perennial gardens. How he would put it, the eternal comeback. I'm not sure whether is that a accurate translation of it, but the things that keep coming through time, year in and year out. That's one thing. To rely on the plants that will die and grow back again without any help. That's the one thing we have to make sure we are taking into account. And on the other hand, we are talking about landscape that will have to evolve. They will not grow in and out, but rather will evolve into something so much more complex. When working in landscape that have certain size, it's important to promote the beginning of a process. That is planting the plants, that is working with the plants that will make the way through a much more nicer landscape in time, that you will not be probably there, but you will be only the agent or starting the engines for this landscape. The simplest probably example would be when you start working with on a forest, as the image I showed, with agaves and plants that will fix nutrients in the soil, and that start planting trees that in time will allow for better trees. So you start with bushes and with herbs and with perennials, and inside these herbs and perennials, the seeds of larger trees will be protected. And so that you have probably two kinds of, you can appreciate or you can understand the two kinds of times that you are talking about. The year in and year out plants that shows you that the landscape is breathing. It kind of has this repetitive condition, but in time you have the patina. That is the beauty of time, of this linear time that you have in the beginning. This very simple tree, this simple forest, and in the end, maybe 80 years time, you will have a beautiful oak forest, and you probably will not be there to enjoy that forest, but you are happy just by making sure you are starting up this process.
Okay, and then one last question. You showed us, I know a bit about the way you work, but you showed us your sketches. And of course, I think at least in here, but I guess also in Rotterdam and in Mexico, actually, I don't know, students work just on the computer. So no sketching at all. So my question would be, how in the process of designing, how do you use your sketches? Like reading the area and the site, or even working and producing the design, your design of a landscape?
That's probably one of the...
Sorry, maybe you can put on one of your sketches, which are beautiful.
Thanks. Am I sharing my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
I think there are two kind of sketches. This kind of a sketch that is overproduced, if you will, that are a computer aid, and the sketches, once again, talking about the time. These sketches are made on site. This project there was actually no project. We just would sit with this guy, with El Conejo, which is somewhere here. I just would sit with this guy and try to explain him the ideas by means of quick sketches. And I think that both of them are very useful I guess that to me is not only at the risk of being extremely repetitive, it's not only a matter of trying to explain myself, but to explain to myself what I'm trying to do. And I find in the sketching the right speed of thinking, because it's something that it would take time for you to draw back and forth, and you spend time enough and trying to figure out the correct scale and the right intentions. And some other times you need to do it super fast, and then and it's very instinctive in that way. And both of them are very very nice. In this case, for instance, you draw it back and forth, and once you're ready, you try to do it very carefully and as close to your imagination is trying to depict it as possible, so that the stones, the size and shape of the stones, and the right proportion of the canopy in this case, and taking time in drawing the trees in the back, because that helps you understand the proportions of the site. All that I find it to myself super important. So it's maybe a back and forth part of the designing process. Sometimes it's a quick sketch we need to show either to people on site or for us in the office, and sometimes it's in the long run in order to have it clear enough to yourself so that you can share it to your clients.
Well, very nice answer. Actually, time comes back again, like slowing down time, even to understand where we are going with the design. So, Hugo, thank you very much for your lecture and inspiring work. I hope to see you again very soon. And thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for your time, and once again for the opportunity to doing this.
It's our pleasure, really.
It would have been better to be there, though.
I know. Next time. Actually, today, for the first time, as I said, we are in presence. Well, half of the class is here, and the other half is from home. But it's much more complicated. We have issues with connections, and yeah, I don't know where we're going actually.
I can imagine. Well, enjoy that.
Yes, thank you. See you soon.
Ciao.
And Felix also. Bye bye. I talk to you later.
Yes, ciao Silvia, we speak later. Ciao.
Yes. Ciao.
Gracias, Felix.
Ciao.
Gracias.
Ciao.
Bye.
Ok, completamente diverso, no? Il paesaggio che abbiamo visto da quelli a cui siamo abituati, anche estremamente disegnati. No, anche noi come italiani veniamo da una tradizione del paesaggio che disegna tantissimo il paesaggio all'italiana, prima il paesaggio alla francese, sono paesaggi molto in cui c'è il controllo sulla natura, no? Sulla geometria della natura. Adesso Ugo ci ha mostrato, ma è un po', diciamo, un trend di riconquistare questo contatto con la natura, che lascia la natura fare il suo corso, quindi ne progetta diciamo, lo spazio, ma poi lascia che sia lei a riconquistarselo, anche occupando lo spazio più umano e più artificiale del contesto stesso. Quindi molto interessante.